And I hope that this conversation, if it does nothing else, really grows compassion for the autistic neurodiverse midwifery community of being like, this shit's really hard and you are behind the starting line already. And then the other thing is I hope it really grows compassion for the neurotypicals and like try to touch that flame. And then you have a body knowing of what it's like to live in this reality.
Welcome back to the Midwifery Wisdom Podcast. This week, host Augustine is joined by student midwife Cam Light. Together, Augustine and Cam talk about how autism and neurodiversity impact practicing midwives. And Cam shares her story of how burnout connected to autism paused her midwifery journey for some time. In this episode, they discuss some educational points on autism and neurodiversity, the parts of midwifery that autism makes more difficult, tips for other midwives working with neurodiverse or autistic people on their team, and some resources to make midwifery easier for neurodiverse and autistic midwives. We'd like to thank Cam for being so open and willing to share her experience in this episode. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to another episode of the Midwifery Wisdom Podcast. I'm so excited to be here today. We're talking about something very near and dear to my heart, and I'm so excited to welcome my guest. Hi, welcome. Will you give us an intro, who you are, where you are, and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Cam Light. I live in Southwest Florida. I am a student midwife. I have been in birth work for almost 10 years. Though I have loved this work since I was 4 years old. This has always been my special interest. So that is a huge part of my life and always has been. I started midwifery school actually in 2017, and then I had a huge burnout because I had been in school my whole life and that had been my thing. And then I realized I need to take a break, and I realize now how much of that was like a lot of masking through school. And then I got to midwifery school, which really rips you out of your comfort zone. So I took a 5-year break and I had my son. I became a CLC and a CBE, and I did a little bit of doula work here and there. But then eventually decided I needed to go back. So I'm back in midwifery school. I'm almost finished with my second year, and I'm currently precepting at a birth center. And yeah, it's definitely been a really long journey to get here. This time through midwifery school has been a lot more of a challenge than the first time. One, I have a son. Two, I realized I was autistic. So there was a whole thing with that in terms of like coming to terms with who I was, how I attempt school, how I get through clinic and balance life. And then I also was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. So going through school with a disability and through a very physically challenging career move with the disability, a physical disability, is it's different, a lot different. But yeah, it's definitely been, it was the right time to go back regardless of all the differences. So yeah, that's
Well,
me.
Cam, thank you for being here. And I just big high five for the duality of or triality of midwifery, disability, and autism, because man, there's a few of us now. And
Yeah.
I wanted to really talk about it because there's a couple of reasons. One is I think that people still don't really understand that autism is really not a disability. It's an entirely different wiring. And so I heard an analogy, I think on TikTok recently, that was like, it's the difference between an Android and an iPhone. Like, they're both phones. We're both people, but we are literally created differently. And I think that that is not really understood because of the ableism and the way that especially American culture likes to create the right way. And so if the right way is being neurotypical and able-bodied and whatever, working in corporate America, then autism becomes a disability because we don't fit that narrow definition. But when you really zoom out and realize that autism is just an entirely different way of thinking, it's a neurodiversity. And there's some evidence coming out that this neurodiversity, autism specifically, was a very useful adaptation for hunter and gathering. ADHD and autism and their multi-availability, awareability worked really well in a hunting and gathering reality. It doesn't work so well with the agrarian day by day thing that came later. And so it could be that actually, we've been existing for a really long time, and that it's the society that doesn't fit, right? So that's an interesting flip. But I just wanted to say, a lot of people don't understand it as a different brain type, wiring type. And then a lot of people have some really bizarre misconceptions, like Rain Man being one, or other really dramatized versions of autism. And certainly there are very severe versions of autism, although I think a lot of evidence is coming out to say that might be autism and injury, autism and vaccine injury, autism and gene predisposition. There might be layers of things. That isn't to discount any experience at all, but just to say that I think there are multi layers to this reality. But there are quite a lot of people, especially women, who are undiagnosed or late diagnosed. And so I want to start with this piece where it's then I figured out I had autism, and that's what you had said. And it's such a common thing that actually there are whole, TikTok channels and Instagram channels devoted to helping people figure out. And so I'd love to take us back to that burnout stage, which was probably autistic burnout, which is a thing when we go through, and I want to take you back to that part in your life and up to and until you had the diagnosis. And I want to be what were the signs that made you start to think that? How did you figure it out? Who helped you figure it out? What are your resources around that?
Yeah. So weirdly enough, okay, so I had this burnout. I was 22 when I dropped out. I was almost 23 when I dropped out of midwifery school, quote unquote, dropped out, took a break. And I think what set it off for me was that I was so used to being in a very regimented schedule between school, work, live my life, school, work. And that I thrive on that because it's the known and it's easy for me to fall into a pattern, and I'm so safe there and comfortable. And I never realized anything was wrong until I started being on call for things and throwing in extra shifts at a clinic and drifting over to another clinic and shadowing all these places. And I was like, something is happening. I'm getting really uneasy here. I don't know what, but this is not, I can't do this right now. And so I took my break because I was like, this isn't it for me at this juncture of my life.
Yeah.
And so, I still loved birth. So I didn't mention this before, but I'm an artist. And so I started getting into that side of things and creating products and art and stuff for birthing people and birth workers and that sort of thing. Because that was my way of staying in it without being in it, done on my own time. And then I actually didn't really start to get the realization that I was autistic until I was pregnant. It's something I had dreamt of for a very long time because this is the work I do and I've always loved, and I couldn't wait to have my baby and, be a mom and enjoy that part of my life. But all of a sudden, my body wasn't mine, and I didn't know how to live as two people because being pregnant really, really messes up your schedule, really throws everything for a loop. You're used to one way and all of a sudden it's just not that way. I also had a really hard pregnancy in that I bled for 10 weeks straight. So from 12 weeks to 22 weeks, I bled and I was on bed rest.
Wow.
I couldn't work and I was forced to be on bed rest, which again, I thrive in like a really scheduled, like regimented environment. And all of a sudden I was thrust into this like unknown, like from day to day, I'd bleed a whole lot. And I'm like, is my baby alive? Like this,
Mm.
it was this really hard time. And I didn't have prenatal care for like half of that because of insurance issues and being dropped by a midwife for the bleeding. And like I hadn't gotten into a OB-based care. It was a lot of rough times. And it made me really, really depressed. And I didn't really
Yeah.
know what to think of that at the time. I didn't realize why I was depressed. I mean, part of it was that I was sad to not get the experience that I had dreamt of. But then at 22 weeks, I finally sat down with a perinatal mental health therapist, and we realized that, I feel like this because I'm not in the schedule that I've set up for my life. And then I was starting to realize that I would get overstimulated from my baby moving. Like I would sit there and I'd be in bed with my partner and we're watching TV and I'd have to tell him to like turn off the TV. And at one point I even told him, I need you to either get off the bed or stop breathing because just the movement of the bed was so overstimulating with what was happening in my body. And it was like a 24
Oh,
thing.
I love this. Let's just pause here because this is such an important topic here. And God, first of all, remember where you are because I want to keep going on this story. But second of all, yes. Oh, I feel this in my body so completely. You described something that I think happens a lot, but is really invalidated or misunderstood. And so one of the neurodiverse parts of autism usually involves some kind of sensory issue. There's like a bunch of different categories that autism exists in, and one of them is sensory experience. And the label from the neurotypical world, of course, is sensory processing disorder, SPD, but it's only a disorder if you're trying to fit in over here. Right? So again, let's remove the ableist language and really talk about heightened sensitivity, heightened awareness, sensitivity on autism, which is a lot. And yes, the experience, I mean, I know this sounds crazy, but every time I was pregnant, I felt like I could feel cells expanding and I could feel growth. Like,
Yeah.
like you're vibrating at a different rate when you're pregnant. And that alone makes the allostatic load almost intolerable, right?
It's so tangible. You can feel the cells replicating and the DNA sewing together. And it's like, this is too much.
Yeah, I felt like I had a vibratory thing. Like you said, my body's not my own anymore. And that is such a good expression. And then the baby starts moving. And you're like, hold on, time out. Totally. Totally. It is kind of an ick feeling. And I think this is hard for folks that don't have the kind of sensitivity that autists oftentimes have. And I want to be clear that autism is a condition of extremes. So some people have extreme sensitivity and some people have lack. And some people have extreme verbal awareness and some people have lack. And so there's a huge polarization in experiences. And I don't want to generalize the autistic experience by what we're talking about, but I want to say that this heightened sensitivity is a very common trait in women with autism. Mm-hmm. And so that's important to note. If the neurotypicals are listening and you get someone in your care who is autistic, either identified or expressing symptoms, really take them seriously. It's real. It's so real. Thank you for that.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely is. The thing I remember most about my pregnancy were those just uncomfortable, feeling like I'm being turned inside out feelings. I loved feeling my baby move because of the bleeding. Like it was always okay, he's alive, he's okay. But I also hated it. So it was a weird dichotomy between the two feelings, but
yeah, I got that. So, Yeah, and then when the allostatic load is here and you add a partner breathing, yeah, it's too much. I totally get that. So we're at this point where you are 24 weeks consulting with someone being like, oh, systems and order is what I like. What
Mhm.
got you from there to autism? How did that happen?
Yeah, so it started as a comparison to another part of my life. So, she's like, "Why do you think you're bleeding?" And I said, I don't know. No one can tell me what's happening. They can't tell me why I'm bleeding, why it's continuing, whatever. And she goes, "Has this ever happened to you before?" And I said, "You know what? Yeah, it has actually. My entire eighth grade year, I bled every day, every day." And she goes, "Well, what was happening?" And I said, I was under a lot of stress. My whole life was thrown upside down. My parents lost their jobs. That was like the 2008 recession. So like we had no money. We were like about to live on the streets, like it was bad. And my parents were drinking, and there was just like a whole level of stress that I never had before. I had this really regimented life up until I was 13, 14 years old. And then all of a sudden I bled for 9 months. And she goes, "So what is it about this connection? Like, what is it about this unease and this like upheaval that you think is bringing this about for you?" And I said, "I don't know, I've never really brought that together." And then she just started mentioning some things. She's like, "Well, do you have, she's like, you've mentioned sensory issues before." She's like, "Have you thought about autism? Like, have you thought about this as a potential for you?" And she started discussing more symptoms in AFAB people. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. Yes, like that is it. I had never felt like somebody had pointed out my life before. I kind of always felt like an alien. I was like, that's just who I am. Like I wasn't, I'm not an earthling. I was just planted here, like this weird, I didn't have a whole lot of friends, and I just love to be in my books and write and be on my own. And I just never felt seen or really heard of like my personality and who I was as a person until she said that. And then it kind of just went from there. So at that point, I was 20, 25, I think. But it didn't really become like a true realization and a diagnosis till I was 20, almost 27.
Got it. Got it. And what my reaction to getting the diagnosis was actually really positive. I've said this before in a post. It was like I suddenly discovered I wasn't a broken horse, I was a zebra. Was that your experience?
Yeah, I was like, oh, there isn't anything wrong with me. Like
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't something that I did, and it wasn't necessarily, yeah, sure, things are exacerbated by situational issues.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't anything that was wrong with me. It was just how I was wired. And
Mm-hmm.
it made so many things click in my life for me and my family. So like
Mm-hmm.
I've had discussions with my mom at this point, and like she's like, "Oh my God, I am also autistic." Like, see, she's realizing at 56 that she's having like this, the same realization. She probably won't go through the diagnosis process because that's a lot for her at 56. She's like,
Mm-hmm.
I've got enough going on in my life. I'm okay with not knowing for sure. And I'm like, okay, that's different for everybody. But then again, looking back at her dad and her mom and seeing all of those traits all line up, and it's just like, oh, this has been prevalent in our family for a long time. And none of it was ever diagnosed because all of us did really well in school. And it was just
Mm-hmm.
missed. It's like, oh, they don't have any problems. We don't have to look into why they're constantly at school or have their nose in a book. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just a studious human being. And it's like, no, sometimes that can mean that is the only place they can exist and feel normal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really clear to me. Yeah, and a lot of women are missed in the diagnosis because of the role of oxytocin, which I think is really fascinating, right? Estrogen and oxytocin, and to a certain extent, progesterone, um, in a female presenting human tends to create a environment in their brain and their biology that it allows them to be more wired for connection. The classic diagnosis of autism includes antisocial behaviors, avoidance of eye contact. And these are primarily the way that little boys and teenage boys respond to autism. And it's not really how women respond to the experience of autism. There's both having this neurodiversity, but hormones and then society and society's expectations and the way we get acculturated change how we are seen. There's a bunch of really great social media influencers about autism right now, but there's a really great one who was describing how this ancient kind of, I mean, I don't know how ancient it is, but the saying in society around like boys will be boys, and then the accompanying lack of statement for girls, which is like, they will toe the line, they will show up, they will be what they're supposed to be, they will do what they're told. Like you can fill in lots of other things. That is why so many girls are missed. So the diagnosis from men to women has been 1 to 4. So 4 boys have been diagnosed for every 1 girl. And of course, with gender fluidity, that's even, less of a, conversation. But what we're seeing now is that like actually the equal amounts have it in both genders and all genders, but they have differing abilities to mask. And so that caused you to have a really intense burnout. I have had really intense autistic burnout. And I feel like we should define that, because it's not exhaustion. It's not irritation. It's not a temper tantrum. Like neurotypicals don't have language for what an autistic burnout feels like. And so do you want to try to explain that with me? Because I think this is an important one.
Yeah. I mean, so mine right at the time I attributed to just like, oh, I'm just tired. Like I've been doing this for so long and I've put so much energy into something, like I need to take a break. And I couldn't put
using
words.
neurotypical words.
Yeah, because that's all I knew, right? I was like, of course, that's just normal. Like I'm 22 and exhausted. That's so normal. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. You shouldn't be tired of living at 22. Red flag. It really was like anytime I had in my life at that time, school and work. And it got to this point where I'd wake up in the morning, and it wasn't that I was depressed or even anxious about it, but I would get up in the morning to drive to school, which, mind you, I have to drive 3 hours to get to midwifery school. It's a hike.
Wow.
And I would sit and cry in the shower because I couldn't make the step out of the shower to get clothes on to go. I couldn't brush my teeth to go. I couldn't get food. I couldn't get my backpack together. I couldn't it just grew into such huge amounts of like executive dysfunction towards these things that were my passions, I wanted to be a midwife. I wanted to be a midwife so bad, but I was so drained cellularly that I just couldn't even do the simplest things to get there.
Yeah. Oh, that I feel that in my body. And again, using neurotypical language, they might look at that and be like, oh, that sounds like you're lazy or you're lacking motivation, or, that's a neurotypical reality. That's why they would stop doing something. But we as autists, we have a very, very different threshold, a very different reality. And I think the best way to understand it is, I've heard it put like this. If I ask you, anyone, to put your hand over a stove burner and touch the flame, you have the ability to, but your body won't let you do it. Right? And I think that when you really like you could do this experiment, go turn on your stove and try to touch it. You can't. You know how to. Your brain and your body are talking. You understand the assignment, and yet you can't do it. And that is essentially what lots of us experience every day for little things. But then when you force yourself to do enough of those little things, your body literally removes your ability to do all the things. And this is autistic burnout. Does that resonate with you?
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah. That really helped my friend when I said that to her. It's like,
Yeah.
Do it. I dare it. Touch the flame. Go ahead, try it. It's like, I can't. I was like, welcome to my reality.
Yeah. I want to do these things. I know I could. I physically cannot do it.
Exactly.
And I would get ill over it. I'd get like the shakes and like get nauseous, and just because I wanted to do them, I just couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So that leads to this conversation about what allostatic load is. So do you want to take a shot at this, or do you want me to explain it?
I know it in terms of like anxiety stressors, right? That like you have these everyday things that eventually build up, and there's only so much you can take before it's too much. But in this term, probably not the best explanation.
Well, we're saying the same thing. I just have like the technical definition of, so our allostatic load is like the amount of input sensation that the nervous system has to deal with on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And autistic inputs are greater. We generally, and again, this is not everyone, but generally, we hear more, we see more, we feel more, we taste deeper, and we smell things more. So already, our walking allostatic load, if you imagine a glass, is like definitely half full. We are aware of the texture and the temperature and the sensation, and I can hear. Everyone has a certain sense that they have elevated usually when they're dealing with sensory issues. Sometimes multiple sense. Sometimes the sense are wired funny. So some folks can taste color, or smell sounds and things that don't make sense to neurotypical people. But already our allostatic glass is already way more full than most folks, just by living, just by simply existing. The sounds are more intense. They affect us differently. The lights are more intense. They affect us differently, et cetera, et cetera. But then when we're dealing with needing to appear neurotypical, when we're needing to amend our way of being in the world, our words, our actions, our body language, our beingness, when we have to amend that to look and appear what is socially acceptable, that's called masking. That makes other people more comfortable, even though it makes me less comfortable. And masking is like filling that allostatic load higher and higher and higher. And then you have all the sensory input, you're masking, and then you go through a stress. And this is why we have autistic meltdowns at such a higher rate. You just say meltdowns, autists have meltdowns at such a higher rate than do neurotypicals, because our glass is being filled so many directions from so many things so much faster. And so when you get to an allostatic load that is intolerable, your nervous system literally shuts down. And I think this is important so that people understand that it's not a conscious decision. I don't think, I need to take a break from this. That's a neurotypical pathway. It's like what you were describing in the shower. I can't. I physically can't. And I hope that this conversation, if it does nothing else, really grows compassion for the autistic neurodiverse midwifery community, of being like, this shit's really hard and you are behind the starting line already. And then the other thing is, I hope it really grows compassion for the neurotypicals, and like, try to touch that flame. And then you have a body knowing of what it's like to live in this reality. Whew, I feel that. I gotta like shake it off a little bit, because it's so, I can feel the stress.
Yeah, no, I understand. I I know I told you before we like really started that, I had a birth this morning. That was a lot. It was a lot of sensory overload. I'll just say it was a very wet birth.
Ah,
And that
say
is
no more. Say no more. Disgusting. I totally get it.
mm-mm, mm-mm. And my preceptor knows I'm autistic. Like the whole birth team knows, and I'm really open about it because that's what makes this job easier.
Yep.
Like clients know if it comes up naturally, like I'm honest and open about it. And we were sitting, it was me, the midwife, the birth assistant, and then the senior student who's like almost finished with her numbers. We were all talking about what was happening in this birth, in the midwife's office. And they're all talking, and out of nowhere, I just kind of spit out, I said, the lights are too loud. And they're like, what did you say? I said, you need to turn the lights off. Like, I'm so sorry. I cannot have this conversation with you. The lights are loud. And like, they didn't question me because they know my sensory input is a little different than theirs. And so they just turn the lights off. But it was just this moment where like I realized how different it can be among like neurotypical midwives or birth workers, and just these little things that maybe they don't necessarily think of. And I know we'll get more into that, but like today specifically, it was just that I reached my load. Everything was wet and gross. And I was like, I can't handle the lights. I can't handle the lights, bro. You got to take them. You got to turn them off.
Something's got to give. Oh, I feel that. Yeah,
Lights off.
I mean, oh, I love that. And I'm going to be a really unpopular midwife and say, like, I hate water birth. It's not at all to do with the benefits. I'm sure they're lovely. And I'm sure every birthing woman who uses water is getting a lot out of it. I hate it. I don't like it touching me.
Gross.
I don't like the skin, the moistness.
Tones in the water, and you get the water in your gloves.
In the glove. Oh, I hate it.
No. Oh, gosh.
Thank you for that. That feels fun to collaborate on. Yeah, no, it's rough. It's rough. So that's a perfect segue. Let's talk about the parts of midwifery or birth work in general that are rough for us.
It's for me, it's funny because I think if I looked at autistic traits in AFAB people without context of birth work, I'd be like, there's no way somebody could be in birth work because it's loud and it smells and it's gross and it's so emotional and everyone's got something going on and it's really high stakes and there's so many moving parts.
Say more. Say more.
But when it's your special interest, those things just don't, they're still there. And some days are harder than others, but they don't
make it possible.
Yeah. It's like
possible.
I can do this because I love it. Like, because it's so ingrained in my DNA and the things that I care about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can deal with the gross days and the really
loud days. Yeah.
I can handle it because I love this and I love the people I get to serve.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's okay. But it's yeah, I think it's one of those things that it can go both ways. I know there's, my husband is neurodiverse as well, but he has ADHD. And so who he also found out late in life. He was 28, just 27, just like me. And so, I'll share something about birth and he's like, I can't even function. Like, I can't even understand what you're trying to tell me right now because I can't do that. So it's just that idea of like, if it's something that you truly care about, AKA your special interest, that you'll do all the things for it, even if it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, we used a couple of words here I'd love to describe. So special interest is an important part of autism. We have a hyper focus on something and maybe several things. that bring us a tremendous amount of meaning, and it's borders on obsessive.
Yeah.
It's all we read and study and learn about and discuss. And there's really nothing else we want to talk about if it doesn't hit that special interest area in an autistic's brain. It is a non-starter. And I have always maintained that I feel so lucky that my special interest was something the world needed, because of, certainly there's the stereotype of the autistic who's obsessed with dinosaurs or trains or something that's really hard to monetize. So I've always felt really blessed that I was obsessed also from a very small age. I attended my first home birth at age 8, and I have never, I mean, I used to carry around babies that were literally bigger than me at the church gatherings and things like that. Like I always, focused on this belly baby boob thing, like we are. And I feel so lucky that I got to have a special interest, and it is special. And this is, I think we're going to shift into the brilliance and the beauty of this neurodiversity. Autistic folks get to become literal experts on their special interest. Like everything about everything about everything, every rabbit hole, all of the unknowns. We spend a lifetime specializing in something. And so even though there are sometimes real challenges in working with autistic midwives or autistic birth workers, also you might not have a better person around, because they retain and share data about things that will slip most people's mind. And of course, there's all those, stereotypes about, the autistic, like Sheldon Cooper was one of the first autistic folks in mainstream media and in a character on TV. And, he would go on and on and on and on and on about what he knew about astrophysics or whatever. And that's what we get to do with midwifery. I mean, Cam, is there anything else you'd rather talk about, think about, or read?
Nope.
Nothing.
I only recently got back into reading fiction in my life, because I was like, you gotta put your brain somewhere else sometimes. It's okay. Like, it's okay, So it's more of a testament to like letting myself breathe.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to
Yeah.
do and other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's it for me. It's like
Yeah.
yes, I'm so exhausted, probably more exhausted than I think I've ever been in my life, between raising a 2.5-year-old and being in midwifery school and working a job, running a business, being in clinic, going to births. Like, it's a lot. But I have never, ever in my life felt more full, because I get to go to clinic for 8 hours and info dump, and it's incredible.
Yes.
It is
So let's tell people what an info dump is. This is another part of the language.
Right. So this is my special interest. My sweet friend in midwifery school likes to call it my Rolodex. So somebody asks me a question and I can rifle through 1,000 pieces of info that I've read about this specific question in my head and pull out what's needed and just word vomit. And it's so well received because it's the answer we were looking for, and I get to do it all day. I love it.
Yes. I used to be able to tell you what side of the page on what page number in what textbook that info came from too, because I'm also very visual and spatial, so I'll remember where it was on the page. It is, I don't anymore because I don't study that much anymore. So I get to talk to people like you. I'm not reading textbooks so much anymore. If a new one comes out, though, I'll read it. But it's that kind of like savant level retention and knowledge. And I think this is one of the huge benefits to working with autistic midwives and birth workers. This is certainly one of the most important compliments I've received in my lifetime. It's like, how do you know that? How do you know so much? How do you know so much? People ask. And it's just the way it is. That's my brain. Hi, welcome. And I think that is one of it really is one of the powerful superpowers of this particular reality. What else do you think is really a superpower of working with midwives and autistic midwives?
It's funny because yes, I would say we have a penchant for having some meltdowns for certain reasons and certain things. But when it comes to an emergency situation, we can compartmentalize so easily and command a room because
Well
we can
said.
think about all the parts and then think 25 steps ahead.
Yes.
And
Ooh.
yeah, I've learned that about myself just in the last few months. Again, working at a relatively busy birth center that we've just had a slew of wildly different complications that I didn't think I would see in just a few short months back to back. And it made me realize how good I am at that. Like I don't feel the fear and I don't react with this like gut. I'm like, I have all the info, I have all the things, and I can just move and direct other people to move.
Yeah, that is really clear. I can see that. And I have a question for you. Have you ever felt, I mean, you don't have to say this because you're currently working with your preceptors, but any mentor that you've ever worked with, not just your preceptors, have you ever felt like surprised at how slow they are in an emergency, or how overwhelmed they are by their emotions in certain scenarios, or by like how clearly you can see the next step and they don't quite see it?
I haven't seen it in preceptors. So far, I'm not done with my journey. I probably likely see other ones and go through other experiences.
Right.
But I have seen it in other birth workers, or I've
Yeah.
actually seen it in hospital settings, wildly enough.
Yeah.
In a transfer,
Yeah.
I see it a lot. And be
Yeah.
like, you didn't see that coming? Because
Yeah.
XYZ
Yeah.
and ABC, like it
Yeah.
was all right there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I definitely see that a lot. And then
This
working,
is something called step thinking.
yeah,
So step thinking is in order to be functional in this very complex neurotypical world, we have to consciously think about, I'll do this and then that and then that and then that, and that will get me to this outcome. And because it doesn't come automatic, we have to think about it. We have developed this muscle where we're extraordinary at step thinking. So like you said, 20 steps ahead, I can see what's going to happen. That's a skill that we've developed because the other things don't come naturally. So an example of this is, agree if you think this is true for you too. It does not come naturally to develop habits in autistic world. So like we have routine, but we don't have habits. So like a habit of brushing your teeth every morning is not actually a habit for an autistic. They have to actually think, oh, I need to brush my teeth, and then do that thing. And that means I have to go to the bathroom, and then I have to get my toothbrush out, and I have to put the toothpaste on, and what the rinse. But that every one of those pieces is a step. And so because we have to practice step thinking every day, all the time, to get life done, we're really good at it. So we can always extrapolate the next steps in any scenario, and you add adrenaline to the mix, and boom, you've got an expert in emergencies. Does that make sense to you?
yes, yeah, absolutely. I yeah. Everything is it's that kind of what I was trying to say about like the compartmentalization. Like everything is broken up into
Yes.
pieces all the time. It's
Yes.
never one complete thought or action. And so
Yes.
like being able to break that up as necessary in a birth or like an emergency situation is incredibly helpful.
Yeah. It's a superpower.
It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. That's very cool. I think another superpower is our sensory processing. Like we feel the lights and the smells and the temperature of the room. That actually, who would you rather patrolling your birth environment than that person that's going to feel it maybe as much as you are in labor? Like, labor heightens your senses. Well, autism heightens your senses. So that means that like I'm sort of adjusting things before they even get out of control or too sensory much, because I can feel it. Don't you think
Yeah.
so?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I totally sense that. It's like I felt hot at a birth recently and I was like, I'm going to go get ice washcloths because that's what I want right now, but no one's going to do that for me. So I can tell that she's going to want one. And
Yeah.
then it was like 5 minutes after I brought it out. She's like, can anyone get me an ice washcloth? I was like, got it, girl. Like, there you go, friend. It's just,
Yes.
so it is that
Yes.
little, it's again, she's like,
Anticipating.
oh,
Yes.
I feel you.
Yes. Yes. Anticipating what they need, because like it's already up for us. Yeah.
Mhm.
But the reverse of that is like it's not up for others. And so life can be really uncomfortable for us. Like that, trying to have a conversation with blaring overhead lights. I know
Mhm.
those lights. Oh God. Grocery stores are my literal nightmare.
Yeah.
Oh, oh God.
Yeah.
I
I
travel a lot. I'm in the airports a lot. And lights are generally either very far away, like huge cavernous spaces, or they're actual tasteful, interesting architectural kind of lights. But um, the way that the staff in an airport gets so desensitized to the volume of humans passing in front of them makes them so both aggressive and abrasive, but also makes them project their energy out so far to have like kind of like a boundary for their beingness, right? Because I mean, imagine the TSI guys or the security checkpoint looking at like how many thousands of people's cards a day. Like I find their energy is so aggressive because they're protecting their own. But I find it like really intense to travel. And I do it all the time, but it's so intense because yeah, energies is we feel energies so much.
yeah.
But because of that, or the flip side of that is I can also generally tell what's going on for someone before they open their mouth. I'm sure you can too. You can pick up on everything.
Yeah, to an extent. Not always like cues, right? So once it's like actually been said or like they're showing something in their language, not so much. But if I can feel the energy before I feel like the or sense
Yes.
what they're saying to me.
Yes.
I can pick up a lot
Yes.
faster.
Yeah. Well, something else I see that we're both have a bit of a fidget thing. Okay, will you explain your fidgeting? This is
Yeah.
called stim. This is called stimming. We stim in lots of different ways. There's a million different types of stims, and
Mhm.
they're all to help us stay present. They're all to discharge that allostatic load that builds up in our body so that we can really stay present. So tell me about your stims and how they work for you.
Yeah. Well, right now I just have this little roly caterpillar in my hands that I can roll around my fingers. This one's nice because it's really quiet. So it's one I can keep like in class or in clinic or, while I'm on a Zoom call. That
Yep.
isn't gonna overload other people's senses because I
Yep.
care and I don't want
Yep.
other people to feel overloaded by my own stimming.
Yep.
Um, in a birth, that's a little harder because I typically have my hands full. So I find myself like either I may sway a lot.
Yep.
Part of that is arthritis pain. But the other
Right.
part of that is also just like it helps me keep focused on what's happening.
Yes.
Um, yeah. Or sometimes I will find myself like, how do I explain it? Um, I'll typically hunt down a yoga ball because I can roll around on a yoga ball in a birth and it doesn't bother anybody. Or I try to find some kind of like seat that has like I'll sit on a cub or something that requires
Yeah.
balance or like core because I need
Yes.
something to ground me. And
Yes.
that is sometimes like abdominal muscles. So like if the cub's not being used, I'm gonna grab a cub because I have to like hold myself to sit on it. So
Mm.
different kind of stim. It's like more of like a sit still, but it's the same kind of thing. I'm just trying to keep myself
Yeah.
in a scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? I've recently I'm newly diagnosed almost 3 years ago. And I didn't discover until I was 45. And I'm so jealous of you discovering it in your 20s. You have such a head start in terms of, living that balanced life, instead of burning out constantly with the masking, right? So I've recently given myself permission to have less forced eye contact is one. And the other one is to do really whatever stim my body wants to do in whatever situation I'm in. And oh my God, this is so freeing and so crazy and so freeing. I feel like I got compressed into this tiny box from when I was small. And so just like coming out of that and getting to like live the energetics that my body is in. And so I went through an airport yesterday, and oh my God, people were so stressed out. There was so much energy. The lines were so crowded. Spring break is ending. So there was like lots of travel, and it was really intense. And so I just like was like, girlfriend, you don't even know any of these people. You just do whatever the hell you want to do. Like no more boxes, no more like just be and do, like let them freak out. Like it's fine. Like you are not going to freak out if you let your body do what it needs to do. And so I had a really great stim going and a really great rock going, and I was able to stay present, and my body didn't hurt after that flight. And that is like a big difference for me. So
That is huge. The pain aspect of things, like with my
huge.
arthritis, if I try to hold back and I don't do these things,
Yes.
I am in so much more pain after a birth. I end up like
Mm,
Charlie horses, and like my
yes.
joints feel super stiff. But if I let myself be myself and I break down those walls, it is a lot easier to recover from a birth or like a really long clinic day or whatever it is.
Yes.
And what you said about the eye contact thing, that is huge. Like I just close my eyes thinking of it, but I find myself doing that a lot more in conversation than I ever did in my whole life, because I
Yeah.
thought I had to look people in the eyes.
Yeah.
Um, and I realized like, oh, I don't have to do that. And I think so much clearer when I close my eyes. Uh,
Yes. Oh God, me too. I mean, I love that we're doing this right now. I think people will get a lot from this. But if I never had to be on a Zoom call again, it would be fine.
mm,
Yes, exactly. Like I really like the auditory. I can focus so much on phone calls. And oftentimes I'll get a business meeting going and I'll be like, great, we saw each other. Okay, let's go back to just audio because it's really, really
so
hard
proud.
to take in the visual sensory and think about what we're going to say and process the data we're receiving. It's a huge amount. And I think that's because again, um, we're taking in so much all the time. It's that sensory hypersensitivity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It definitely is a helpful tool to just close one sensory input and hopefully allow the other ones to work quote unquote normally.
It's yeah. Big
Normal.
quote there. Well, as we're wrapping up, let's give some tips. So if you are neurotypical and you've made it all the way through this conversation, congratulations and thank you. We really appreciate you.
Truly.
And what tips could we give folks who either have already identified autistics on their team or neurodiverse birth workers on their team, or because of some of the symptoms that we've been talking about, or you go and read online, they think, oh, maybe this person is neurodiverse. What are some tips? How could they interact better? How could they communicate better? How could they work together better?
Yeah, I think a huge thing that's made a difference when I work with a team is that like I said, I'm very open from the beginning, so that helps. But I usually get asked, or I try to prompt them asking of like, what accommodations do you need to make our communication skills better, especially in like an emergency scenario. Um, when there is a lot going on, like particularly an emergency, and there's a lot of sensory, I need someone to look at me because I need to read their lips. I can't always process auditorily. Um, so like captions are really helpful, but you don't have captions at a birth. So that is one of those moments where I'm like, I need you to get my attention and then so I can see your lips.
Yes.
Because I
I
cannot,
100% agree.
I have to be able to read your lips, or I'm not going to pick up what you're saying to me, and whatever needs to get done is not going to get done.
Yes.
So again, being able to have an open conversation about, and then be able to take those suggestions not as a dig to how they practice or how they are, but be like, okay, this person needs something or is requiring something of me that I don't typically do. And that's nothing wrong with me. It's just something that they need. And it's something I can, work on. I think
Yeah.
sometimes it can feel like a call out, like
Yeah.
you're not doing this correctly, but like that's
Yeah.
not the case, or that's definitely not what we're trying to say. And because we don't always say things the way they need to sound to
Yeah.
feel like you're in an appropriate conversation, or that somebody's not mad at you or upset, it can feel like an attack. So just like understanding that, especially after a long day of clinic, a long birth, that like just because this person isn't smiling and bubbly with you or having like a normal conversation or showing like facial emotion, like doesn't mean they're mad at you, doesn't mean something's wrong. Like it's not about you. They just probably have nothing left to give you. And that's okay.
I love that. That's such good advice. Yeah, I would definitely, one of the biggest things that I would say if you're going to work with a neurodiverse person is really, really stop turning on overhead lights and buy lamps.
Please,
That's my advice.
Beg of you.
Buy lights, like lamps that don't have the buzz, like incandescent, or even like the new LED lamps. They don't buzz the way fluorescent lights buzz. And the light is then at eye level instead of above. That makes such a difference in my reality. I don't know about yours, but
it's the biggest difference.
It's the biggest difference.
Yeah, it's part of the reason why I do appreciate the birth center, because we can set up the birth center the way I like, right?
Yes.
But walking into somebody's home is really, really hard because I cannot.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation, but that idea of like I bring everything down a notch.
Yes.
Just like, a little bit more soothing and relaxing, which midwives are typically good at, but I think sometimes we overlook these little
really
things.
Simple things. Yeah, the couple I would say to make a sensory comfortable environment for autistic, and this could be your clients too, right? Doesn't even necessarily have to be the people you work with, but like a sensory neutral environment is do not allow chemical scents in your clinic. I have always had a sign at the front of my clinic that says, this is a scent-free facility. People have allergies. Please don't wear perfumes, like those kinds of things. 2 is like lamps, not overheads. 3 is rugs. Rugs make such a difference because they absorb and dampen sound. So I think if we have just a simple throw rug in every prenatal space, in every prenatal room, I can think so much better in those spaces.
Absolutely. And if it's a nice clean rug, it's better because I can stim on the carpet and I can just.
Yes, and then the toes in the carpet. 100%. I was thinking that too, but I was like, it might be a little much. But yes, that is massive. And it doesn't even have to be any kind of fancy rug. Like you could just get a braided jute rug, whatever, but it brings the sound down. And then the last thing, for me personally, is about texture. So there are certain nylon textures that make my hair stand on end, and I won't touch you or the bed or the couch or whatever's made of that. So definitely, if you work with an autistic midwife, make sure that you check in with them for new purchases to make sure that the texture is not heinous.
Accurate. That's a really good suggestion.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just had the thought.
Yeah, I know, right? Disgusting. No. Well, we are not so masked, right? So if I was forced to see that in clinic, I would be like, that's an interesting choice. But yeah, we're able to express how we really feel right now, which is like actual throw up. Like it turns my stomach. Don't make me touch that, right? So that's fun. Do you have any other advice in terms of communication or working together in your experience that could help some neurotypicals be more sensitive?
Hmm. Not a whole lot. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Again, a lot of it is just being able to have these open conversations. Um, but I think some of that is personality as much as like a
It
tip or
is.
trick.
Yeah. 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 Show up for each other.
Mhm.
Decide that you care, that they enjoy working with you, decide that you care that someone isn't struggling in the environment that you're built, definitely. Um, yeah, you mentioned home birth is hard. Home birth is real hard.
So hard. I
Home
used to
birth is
love it.
so
It
hard.
used to be my like bread and butter. And then the more I did birth center, I was like, oh man, I love having a space that like I know very well and I know the scents and the textures and I can change the lighting how I want. And it's just a lot more comforting and regulating.
Yes. And then you do your job better because you're
I
not
do.
focused on all yeah, exactly. I think home birth is beautiful. I had home births because of the level of comfort. I think
I
moms
think
should
they're
have that.
incredible.
Yeah. But but it can be really a challenge to be in a totally new environment, new scents, new smells, new foods, new carpet, new everything for a high stress environment. That can be really hard. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
to shift into advice for autistic people, like if you're autistic and you don't love home births, like you don't have to do home births.
Also
I
true.
just want to give you permission. You don't have to do that. You can
Yeah.
love them for the mom and hate them for you and not go to home births. Like you can open birth centers or work in hospital spaces and that are predictable and familiar. And you can do a great job in those spaces because there are birthing people in all those spaces. So just really important to know. Yeah.
Yeah. Truth.
Yeah.
Um, the biggest one, I think this is how you found me, is that you asked about the use of AI. And I would
Mm.
want to touch on this because it's been a super huge help in for me. When I am communicating to a person, I don't always sound the most human. And
Yes.
sometimes Chat GPT sounds more human than I do. And I know that's
Yes.
crazy. Uh,
No. Truth.
so if
Truth.
I have to talk to somebody about like a specific situation, like a lab result or some kind of ultrasound diagnosis or something that I requires some emotional handling. It's not that I can't have those emotions or share those emotions. It's that I have a really hard time putting those emotions into words.
Yes.
And so I let ChatGPT build some scripts for me around certain conversations, and that has been so helpful.
I love that. That's such
I've
a
even
great
gotten
tip.
compliments before of like, that's a really succinct way to say that. Thank you. Like, I understand. And I'm like, great. Thank AI because those
Yeah.
are, it's partially, it's edited by me, but like,
Sure.
really gives
Sure.
me the structure of how to say the thing.
Yes.
And
I
sometimes
let
that's,
I let ChatGPT edit my emails that have to include frustration, anger, let down, disappointment. I'm really not great at expressing those emotions. I come off way too harsh. I don't know how to mask so well when I'm legitimately frustrated. Um,
I
yeah.
literally don't understand how to write an email. So it's
Then there's that.
almost always auto-generated. I'm so sorry. I try my best, but I
No,
don't
it's
get it.
great. When I'm enthusiastic, I can type like, "This is so great," and I'm so happy, and then I can
Nine
tell them the
exclamation
thing.
points.
Yeah, I can do that, right? I use all the emojis, that sort of thing. Like I can speak neurotypical when I'm happy, but when I'm frustrated, I'm like, "Bah, bah, 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 bah," and I sound really, really aggressive. And so I always feed those email drafts into Chat GPT and I'm like, make this sound kind and loving with feedback. And then I get an email I can actually send without like destroying someone's day, which I know happens because, yeah, autistic.
Yep. Felt. I've had emails that definitely didn't, it's not what they were trying to do, but they've absolutely ruined my day. Like
Yeah,
I can't understand what you're telling me right now. Like I can't figure out the emotions and that makes it so much worse.
so much worse. Yeah. So
Um,
use AI for what it's
AI,
for, which use it,
absolutely. It's a
use the
great
tool.
tool.
Mm-hmm.
The other tip I have is that, yeah, you can preach self-care all day, and that's super helpful, I think, for like neurotypical people. But when it comes to neurodiversity, you have to do self-care with the things that are actually going to regulate your nervous system. So not just like take a bath, like no, like you need to find the sensory input that's going to regulate all the other input. Like it's not typically a deprivation thing, which I think sometimes um neurotypical people do, is that they're like, well, I'm gonna just take myself out of this huge sensory overload and everything's gonna be fine. When for us, sometimes we have to keep loading in with some other kind of sensory thing
Mm,
to feel
mm.
regulated. And so for me, after a birth, like I go spend a couple hours in my hammock and just swing.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
incredible. Like that is how I come down from the
Yes.
stuff, you know, from the all of it.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I have
Very regulating. Mm,
yeah, like a
mhm.
comfort meal that I know I will enjoy and that's safe
Yes,
in my
safe
mouth.
foods. Oh, let's
Yes.
talk about safe foods. This is like juicy stuff right here.
I have the same snack after every birth, and it's these
Yes.
giant vegan peanut butter cookies from Alternative Baking Company, and either a huge glass of water or a big thing of Steve's blueberry pomegranate tea. Like literally every time, I
Yes.
it's what calms me and regulates me.
Yes.
To made it through. I'm on the other
Yes.
side. I take a breath.
Yes. It's partly Pavlov's, like the repetition, like the same thing, but it's also partly this regulating experience of having familiar textures. Am I right?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
just did all the things that were unknown and scary, and now I can go back to these things that are safe and I know will feel good in my body.
Yes. Yes. And so neurodiverse people have very different types of safe foods, but everyone has a food or a collection of foods that are so familiar. You can eat them anytime and it won't trigger you. In fact, it will calm you. And that is a great thing. If you're an employer of a neurodiverse person, ask them what their safe food is and like commit to having that if that is helpful for these long births and things like that. That is so helpful.
That's so
Yeah.
smart. I have to carry around just like a whole load of mashed potatoes or something because that's my thing. Like any time
Yeah.
of day, mashed
Yeah.
potato.
Yeah. I feel you. There's a mouth feel there. It's a specific mouth feel. I get it. I get it. I get it. 100%. I have a number of safe foods that I've had to figure out where that I can get them in any country I'm in.
Yes. Oh, that's rough.
That's been a unique journey for me.
Oh, I can't even imagine. I'm so glad for you that you can do that. I want to be that person. I
Yeah.
I am not that person. I can't be. Like
Yeah.
it would be so overstimulating, but
Yeah. I've
I
had some moments.
I love that for you. Keep going.
I've had some moments of not regulated.
Why am I doing
But
this?
this I'm committed to growth, and I think adversity is where we have growth. And so yeah, I keep figuring it out, but now I've figured it out and I've got some real solutions. Just so you know, in case you were ever wondering, a
I can't
caprese salad with fresh mozzarella, basil, tomatoes, balsamic olive oil, and salt can be found in almost every country in the world.
love it.
So I've now convinced myself I won't starve if I travel.
I can find a piece of salad and everything will be okay.
Because there's lots of days when I just like don't eat because I'm like, nope, none of that. It's gonna work for me. So yeah,
Mhm.
we do need to find those things. Well, this has been really so fun, Cam. It's so great to like have some simpatico around this. I think there's going to be a lot of folks who listen who feel the same way. There is a shockingly high amount of neurodiverse folks that are undiagnosed. So if you feel like you're undiagnosed, we'll put I think it's the RAD-R test, which has been validated multiple times. We'll link that below.
Didn't even bring that up, but yes, that
Yeah.
that was one of the big factors in getting diagnosed.
Yeah, it is. It is what is used to diagnose people professionally. And now it's been validated with such high accuracy that if you take it even on your own, it is also validating. So if you're wondering and you want to find out, am I on the spectrum? We have that. We'll link that down in the show notes so you can take a check at that. And then Cam, how can people reach out to you if they want to be like, hey, let's be friends?
Yeah, so my handle's kind of the same everywhere. It's wildmoon.co, WYLDMOON.co, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok.
Great.
That's where I'm at.
Wild Moon. I love it. Well, Cam, this has been just so insightful and confirming and just really thanks. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for being brave.
Happy to
I
do
really
it.
appreciate it.
Nice yeah, it's always nice to let that off. So I appreciate you.